A Florida prosecutor is firing back at the family of Trayvon Martin today. He calls their version of what happened the night that Trayvon was killed outright lies. New reports show that State Attorney Norm Wolfinger met with the Sanford Police Chief Bill Lee on the night of the shooting and then reportedly disregarded detectives' advice to arrest George Zimmerman. The family wants the Justice Department to investigate how Wolfinger handled the case. Well, Wolfinger says it didn't happen. He says, I encourage the Justice Department to investigate and document that no such meeting or communication occurred. I've been encouraging those spreading the irresponsible rhetoric to stop. Joining us this morning is Jasmine Rand. She is an attorney for Trayvon Martin's family. Nice to talk to you. Thanks for being with us. So let me walk through this letter because his reaction of Wolfinger is based off a letter that comes from another family attorney, Benjamin Crump, and he says this: we learned, that Chief Bill Lee met with the state attorney, Norm Wolfinger. And you heard Wolfinger say that's a lie. The meeting did not happen. He wants the Justice Department to come in and document that did not happen. Both of those things cannot be true. Which one's lying?
You know, obviously, we believe our version of the facts. I cannot reveal our source, but we believe that our source is credible and that a meeting did take place between Wolfinger and Chief Bill Lee that night, you know, and perhaps more influential is even their decision not to take the lead homicide investigator, Chris Sereno's advice and make an arrest on manslaughter charges for the killing of Trayvon.
Sereno, it said, has an affidavit to say that was his position, and I haven't seen any evidence of an affidavit as well. Do you have that evidence of the affidavit? That's also talked about in the letter.
I do not have a copy of that affidavit, but he did prepare an affidavit. I believe several news sources have obtained a copy of it. And, you know, I think the fact that he prepared an affidavit is telling in and of itself how strongly he felt about his position. It's very unusual that someone would prepare an affidavit of that nature.
The letter goes on to say, we believe that family members, meaning George Zimmerman's family members, were present at the police department. What do you mean by that specifically? And which family members? Are you alleging that there was some kind of undue influence or negotiation between George Zimmerman's family and the police?
We are calling, you know, that into question. We're asking the police to look at, the United States Department of Justice to look at a totality of the circumstances and just ensure that there was no improper action on behalf of any government officials that night. And if there was, that they are brought to justice accordingly.
Do you believe that there was improper action on the part of the state attorney? Do you think he was unduly influenced in this case?
I do believe so. That's why we wrote this letter. And, you know, something just doesn't sit right with us about this incident. Like I said, we have credible sources stating that Wolfinger and Chief of Police Bill Lee did meet that night. So that's why we've asked the United States Department of Justice to make an inquiry into that specific meeting and why they chose not to press charges.
I know you're not going to reveal your sources, but can you tell me a little bit more about them, just generally? One source or two sources, and sort of what are their roles in the investigation in its entirety?
I can't say anything with any more specificity.
Can you tell me if it's one source or two sources?
I believe that it's multiple sources that know of the meeting that took place that night.
Okay. I want to talk to you about this videotape. We've seen it a lot and talked about it a lot over the last few days of George Zimmerman getting out of a police vehicle, and it's all sort of recorded. It's now been enhanced, and if you look more closely, you can actually see it does seem to be that there's some kind of injury kind of on the top of his head. Do you think that this injury, some people were saying that he had not been injured in the scuffle that was described in the police report. Do you think that injury does, in fact, support his version of the events, that he was attacked, as he has told police, by Trayvon Martin?
Absolutely not. I have not personally seen the enhanced version, but I think the most telling sign is that the second ambulance that was originally called out to the scene to respond for any potential injuries to George Zimmerman was canceled because they said he was not in need of medical attention. He arrived to the police station in a cop car. He did not arrive in an ambulance. In the version that I saw, there's no apparent serious bodily harm or injury. And, you know, he went home that night. He didn't go to a hospital, and Trayvon went to the morgue.
His family members have said that a medical exam will show that, in fact, his nose was broken and it happened in a scuffle with Trayvon Martin.
That does not change our position. You know, once again, George Zimmerman was the aggressor. He pursued Trayvon in this instance. If he did have any medical injuries, that did not give him the right to use deadly force and shoot and kill Trayvon.
Let's talk about this audio clip. We had it analyzed yesterday and talked to the audio expert who was analyzing it, and what he found was that he could not confirm that it was George Zimmerman's voice, as George Zimmerman claimed in the police report to the officers. Here's a little bit of what the expert told us yesterday.
If we're comparing Zimmerman versus the screams, then we're getting a likelihood ratio of 48% and a false rejection rate of 12.35% and a false acceptance rate of 14.9%. Those low numbers get translated as it's very unlikely that it is the same person.
The upshot of what he's saying there, and he kind of walked us through that math yesterday, but that he does not believe that that is George Zimmerman's voice screaming on the tape. But what he could not confirm that it was Trayvon's voice either, because he says he doesn't have the original, voice to match it, to do the tests on it. Will you get to him an audio tape of Trayvon's voice so that he can do that test? Would you like to see that?
And I know that Mr. Parks stated yesterday that we would provide that audio recording. I do not have any personal knowledge whether or not we have an actual audio recording of Trayvon's voice.
The FBI is now canvassing the neighborhood, this gated community. What sort of conversations are you having specifically with the FBI at this point?
I'm not having any conversations with the FBI at this point. They're conducting their investigation.
Interesting. All right. Well, thanks for updating us on what is happening in the case. We certainly appreciate it. We know the Department of Justice obviously has been called in to investigate the police as well. Jasmine Rand is an attorney for Trayvon Martin's family. Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet. Coming up in our next hour, we're going to talk to one of George Zimmerman's neighbors. Frank Taffy really had an interesting thing to say about Trayvon-like dudes that had been in the neighborhood. While he was also talking about how race he didn't think was involved in the case, he went on to say, but there have been all these Trayvon-like dudes. We're going to discuss what exactly he meant by that a little bit later this morning.